So everybody's heard of Helen Keller. What brought my attention to her is that I have an uncle-in-law. He is deaf, and you know how some people would use their disabilities to collect a check and be able to sit at home. Well, instead of him collecting a check and sitting at home, he went to college and got a degree, and he is now a professor here at OSU OKC. So as I was looking online to find somebody to talk about, I just read a little bit of her biography, and so I was like, oh, that'll be interesting. If my uncle can, you know, overcome and not let his disabilities rule his life, then, you know, how amazing would it be that this deaf, blind, and mute girl could overcome and achieve many things. I'm going to talk about 3 things with Helen Keller: her education, the work and influences that she did in many people's lives, and then the legacy that she left behind in her death. Does everybody have kids here? Kids or a pet that you love? Okay. Imagine that you're outside and it's warm. It's not too hot. It's not too hot, but it's not cold. It's that, you know, nice fall breeze. You're outside at the park playing with either your animals or your kids. Now imagine if you couldn't hear them playing or you couldn't see them playing. How frustrated would you be? How irritated would you get? Her parents hired a teacher, Anne Sullivan, to come into their home and just to teach her. She began teaching Helen by finger spelling, and the first word that she learned was doll, because that's the gift that Miss Sullivan brought to her at her very first visit. Helen was having trouble making connections between objects and then actual words, spelled out words. So the more frustrated that she would get, the bigger her tantrums would be. So Miss Sullivan thought that, hey, if I isolate us and take us out somewhere where it's just me and her, we can learn, maybe it'd be easier. So they moved out to a plantation on Helen's family land, and there they began to open up doors where Helen wouldn't be so frustrated, and she was learning the connections between objects and letters. Miss Sullivan took her out and put her hands under a pump and would help her pump the water out, and she felt the water, and then she would spell the word water in her hand. So when she learned those words, she got excited. She started hitting the ground. She wanted to know what the letter word for the ground was. And so she taught her that. She went to, in 1890, she went to speech classes in Boston at the Horace Mann School of Deaf. It took her over 25 years to learn how to speak so that others could understand her. During that period of time, she met several famous, influential people like Mark Twain, which he introduced her to an oil man named Roger Henry, who was fascinated by her story and her accomplishments that she had done with Anne Sullivan, that he paid for her college career, for the rest of her college career. Then she met with a guy named John Macy, who was going to marry Anne Sullivan, and he helped her write her first book, The Story of My Life, which covered from her childhood to her college years. In 1946, Helen was appointed Counselor of International Relations of American Foundation for the Overseas of the Blind. She traveled 35 countries on 5 continents. In 1955, she took the longest trip of her life, 40,000 miles and over 5 months of traveling across Asia. Then in 1957, her book finally became not only a television drama, but a Broadway play. The legacy that she left behind was she influenced and helped raise funds and awareness for blind charities to help improve the living conditions of blind people, because some they live on the streets or they live in homeless shelters, things like that. In 1936, she was awarded Roosevelt Distinguished Medal, and in 1964, she received a President Medal of Freedom. She was also elected in 1965 to the Women's Hall of Fame. I just thought her story was fascinating because, if my uncle, I could do it. So I want to leave you with a quote from Helen Keller. Although the world is full of suffering, it is full also of the overcoming of it. My optimism then does not rest on the absence of evil, but a glad belief in the preponderance of good and a willing effort always to cooperate with good, that it may prevail.